Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Nick Hollins. I'm a co-founder of WindProtocol. And today I'm speaking with the CEO and one of the founders of one of the startups that are on our platform right now, Stefano. Welcome.
Thank you very much for it.
Absolutely. And just from the outset, if I could just ask, what's the name of your startup on Wind?
So the name is Korporatio with the K, and then like it sounds like a Z, but it's like the TIO at the end.
Cool. So we're jumping on a call today in this video to kind of give a sense for potential investors who are watching this and checking out the startup on the platform, to run through some kind of key questions that might be in their mind and give you a chance to kind of speak to what Korporatio is up to. So from the outset, can I ask, what problem is the company solving?
In very simple, we're trying to like improve the way that companies and company governance is run nowadays. In a more like broad explanation, if you take, for example, the author Kafka, in many of his stories, he describes how like bureaucracy nowadays is consuming a lot of the time of our day. And basically a person needs to spend an insane amount of time every day and in every step of something that he or she needs to do. This situation is kind of like changing a lot for like the consumer. Take, for example, payments, bills, paid or taxes, moving transportation from one side to another. So the consumer side of the world and society is kind of like improving step by step, of course, in a different way from country to country. The company governance on the other side, and so the way that we incorporate a business, we run it, the stakeholders that are involved in the process, that thing is still the same for like since 100 years or even 200 years. There is no improvement whatsoever. And so we thought that because nobody was actually working about a solution there, that it was time for someone to start doing something. And so we step in and we start building our product.
Okay, that's interesting. So in terms of like incorporating businesses and potential bureaucracy and admin side of business, how exactly are you solving that problem?
So I think that the best way of answering that is to start like in the traditional way of incorporating a business. So nowadays, when you want to like incorporate something, you go either to your lawyer or to an incorporation agent. You fulfill quite a lot of papers and forms, depends on the numbers of the country where you are. You run the KYC, the EML, in case if you're like a public persona, you need to run the PEP as well. All different forms, all different check and to-do lists that you have to do. You need to pay, of course, the government fees, waiting a long time, some weeks, depends on the country where you are. Some countries can be like a month, others where it's like a little bit easier, might be just a couple of days. So it's not always like a bad thing all around the world. Once you have your company, you receive like your physical papers. So it's a lot of waste nowadays because I don't think that anybody's still using fax, but whatever. And once that you start running your company, every time that you want to do something, transferring shares, approving a new shareholder, having a board members meeting, a vote for shareholders approved, paying taxes, whatever thing that you have to do, you need to pass through your incorporation agent or corporate secretary, get in contact with the Chamber of Commerce of the country where you are, waiting for an approval, pay some taxes in some cases, and only at the end, after like 10 days, 2 weeks, even a month of time of waiting, you get your answer that whatever you wanted is actually being approved. So just by describing this process, it's a nightmare. It's super boring. It's super complicated. How do we solve that? You go online, you complete an online form. In 48 hours, your company up and running. You get a dashboard. Every time that you want to make like a change or every time that you want to like do something, you do that via your dashboard and it's done. As soon as the action is complete and approved on the dashboard, it has legal requirement immediately. It is validated and is immediately up and running.
Okay, that's super interesting. So in terms of it being immediately done and you say like it's legal, it's binding, it's a proper agreement, what's the technology behind that and how have you guys put that in place in terms of are there jurisdiction exceptions or does this work anywhere in the world?
Yeah, not yet, unfortunately. So technology-wise, we use blockchain. We are 100% on the Ethereum mainnet. So the company shares, for example, are represented by ERC20 tokens that are modified for security law. So they're not standard ERC20 that you can transfer to whoever you want. Think about that, for example, to the ST20 protocol or the SRC20 protocol of different companies, kind of like working the same way. The dashboard is a decentralized application. So every single action that happened is actually stored on the Ethereum mainnet and is secured there. On top of that, for specific actions and specific type of files that might be too big to put that on the Ethereum mainnet, for example, a picture profile, we use IPFS to encrypt the data in that case. So it's a little bit less decentralized, but again, we're referring on type of data that are not very important. Like the profile picture is an information that nowadays is pretty much public. Everybody can find that. While all the rest is stored 100% on the blockchain, nothing is on our side, so we cannot see anything of what is happening. So it's 100% decentralized on that side. Regarding the jurisdiction, the model was first created and approved in Republic of Seychelles back in January of 2018. So it's already a year that the model was approved. So far, we've expanded the model to other 2 jurisdictions, which are San Vicente de Grenadine and Panama. So we're still like on the side of being fully on the offshore jurisdictions model. We're now running a pilot for a 4th jurisdiction, which is still, again, on the offshore side. And we're in talk with other 2 jurisdictions, which this side are going to be like in the main, still offshore, of course, if you're not from that country, but they're more like traditional jurisdictions opening up to US and Europe directly at that point.
Okay. Turning now to ask about your team. Maybe we could start. I'm interested to hear about like who is the senior management of your team or all that kind of thing. But maybe we can start with yourself. If you could share a little bit about your background, your kind of professional experience, business experience, stuff like that.
Sure. So myself, I'm Italian. Before this company, I found 2 different startups. I was a mentor for Startup Bootcamp. I've been an angel for a couple of startups as well. I worked all my life in the startup sector. So I do not know anything about big corporation, but I have 15 years of work experience in the startup field. And that's basically like where back and forth between mentoring, advisoring, investing, and so on. I think I touched base with 50 different companies and startups. So I kind of have an idea of like how the patterns of companies that are failing are always repeating over and over. The mistakes are becoming like kind of all the same. Doesn't mean that they are easy to avoid. They're extremely complicated, like nothing to be ashamed of like failing. I failed. My second company was not a good result neither. So failing is part of the game. But you get like to that point of learning, of understanding like what are the paths that are like helping you to succeed or maybe increase your percentage of success a little bit higher than the average. So that's for myself. The other 3 people that are part of the core team are, the first one is the CTO, George, which is Ukraine. He's a guy that has run like multiple blockchain projects and has like more than 15 years work experience in the tech field. He's the guy that built up the second version of the architecture. So when we first tested out the product, the architecture was like kind of like not exactly the best possible option available. It was kind of like an alpha. We were interested in like being sure that legally we could have achieved what we wanted to do. Once we got approved in Seychelles, it became more like a sort of improving the product to ensure that we could have like ensure scalability, a proper UX UI, and kind of in general like a better experience for the final user. So George was the one in charge of all of that. Then we have Lulu, which for a blockchain project, having a female person in the top, I know that it's like pretty uncommon, and she's fantastic. She's in charge of like the operation and at the moment the marketing part as well. She has run previous companies as well in the past. She was part of the World Economic Forum, so she has a strong experience of like how at the high level economy works, jurisdictions, governments, and all of those things. And the last person is Diego, which is basically helping out with like all the legal side. He's the oldest one. It's kind of like the grandparents of the team, I would say. And his experience is simply fantastic. He was an advisor and a consultant for more than 15 governments around the world. So clearly the impact of like having him on the side means like increasing the speed of successful and replicating our model and being approved by one country to another in a very fast pace, because he has the experience of actually having seen all of those things before us. That's kind of like the core team. After that, we have other 6 people that are working, of course, dividing between like blockchain developers, front end, full stack, project manager, a little bit of operation work here and there. So it's kind of like in total, we're 10 people. We're all decentralized. So we're kind of like mimicking the concept of the blockchain. So everybody's in different part of the world. We're communicating and working like non-stop basically, because like it's a classic rule of like you don't have a central office, therefore you're 24/7 on the project. And that's so far as turning out to be like extremely good, because we actually have delivered quite a lot in like the 10 months that we were actually like live and going with the entire model. And that's probably like, I'm not sure if it's going to be like sustainable in the long run, because of course like more the team expand, more is going to be challenging for the senior managers to manage like a lot of different key people. But so far it's going very, very good. So pretty happy with this structure of management.
Cool. And with the team that you have right now, obviously you're saying you have your core team, and then there's the larger team beyond that, and sort of based around the world and stuff. Would you say at this point in time today, is there anyone critical missing? Is there like a hire or something that you would potentially like to make, someone who'd be a great addition?
Yeah, I think that the missing part would be like a solid or a very strong CMO. Because that was not part of like our core. Because as you can imagine, like you start having like a model that is approved only in one country, and then you improve your product, and then you start testing out if actually like you can replicate your model. We opened 7 Cent in Panama literally 2 months ago. So it was kind of like a long path of like trying to experimenting and understanding how much we could have stretched the model. We didn't focus on like, getting clients or anything like that, because our main concern was like, are we going to be stuck in Republic of Seychelles for the rest of our life, or can we actually expand this thing somewhere else? Now that we actually have achieved this, and we're going like in a very fast speed of basically getting new jurisdiction, it seems that the game is becoming more a marketing game. So it's a little bit more like, okay, we've proved that all of those things are possible. Now that it's becoming a marketing game, we need a strong CMO over there. So yeah, definitely that's a main missing part in the team.
Okay, sure. I'd ask as well, so you're saying that you're opening up new jurisdictions and you kind of have your team based everywhere. But can I ask, where are your customers based?
Same answer, actually. So majority of our customers are from Europe. But then again, you got general all around Europe. You got Portugal, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy. You got some clients in Russia as well, Ukraine, Germany. So it's kind of like Europe is, I think it counts for like a 70-80% of the clients that we have. And then you expand, of course, you have like other countries like Singapore, Canada, Thailand, Japan. So a couple of clients in Africa as well, Somalia, Ivory Coast. So in general, it's like we don't really have like a specific market, because the jurisdictions where we operate are not limited by anybody. So everybody from everywhere in the world can actually incorporate a company in those specific countries. And on the other side, it's more like in sense of like the technology. So I think that like what makes the clients similar to each other's is the fact that I understand the technology. They're willing to actually taking a step further to be empowered themselves or in control by basically like having their dashboard and them having the decision, more than old school type of clients that are maybe like just picking up the phone, calling their lawyers and letting the lawyer sorting out everything. So that's kind of like what makes them similar.
Cool. So related question on that, when we're talking about your customers, who is your target market for your product? Like how would you, what does the outline look like of who your customers are potentially into the future as well?
So at the moment, clearly, there is the obstacle that we need to consider that we're still operating only in offshore. And educational wise, a lot of people are still thinking that being in an offshore country means like doing something illegal. I always trying to explain this as much as I can. Having an offshore country doesn't mean doing anything illegal. It is illegal in the moment in you're trying to steal or like laundering money or doing something that the law say that you cannot do that. But having a company in another country, it's legal. Unfortunately, this thing is still seen like not exactly as a positive thing. So the type of client as today is someone that, again, understand technology, has an experience or an understanding somehow of how offshore companies works. And so like kind of like your market pool is pretty small. Again, we have started on this side because that was the way that we approaching by having like a new model, a new type of company, a new type of system in place. In the long run, not very too long, because we're talking about like summertime, we're going to be able like to getting on countries that are more recognized in, again, US and Europe. At that point, the type of clients are basically like the millennials. So all the people that are like used to like travel, not having to relate in face-to-face with the customer support. The type of people that are like going away from the customer desk or like having to go physically in a specific location. The digital nomad community, that's extremely helpful for people like them. The blockchain community, clearly, because it's a blockchain product, so it's extremely simple for those people to understand how to use that. The startuppers, because clearly the model decreased cost of governments and operation, letting the entrepreneurs to focus more on what is important for them. So I would say like maybe even the Generation Z, which is like more in line on the millennial. So for the side of like the new type of work that are coming in, take for example like the Instagrammers, the YouTubers, the Twitch streamers, all of those people that are like kind of creating a brand of themselves, and they're also creating companies on themselves and behind, but they're still using like traditional systems of doing that. So the classic accountant, the classic lawyer of doing that. As it is so easy for those people to be like a solo persona company where they're alone doing everything, running the company itself is actually like quite in line with the type of work that they're already executing.
So we've gotten into there a bit of an outline for the target market for your product. How big is this relevant market? Like, what do your projections look like on potential for growth in terms of the market that you can tap into?
So if we're considering like the general market of the company incorporation, we're talking about a market that is bigger than $1 trillion, and it grows like in a steady path of a 4% plus minus almost year over year. That is the entire company government system. If we're considering our product itself in order to like attack that type of market, in 20 years, that market, it might actually get to like that size for us. Because of course we have to take away all the traditional markets, the public companies, the old school sectors that maybe don't see a potential in all of that things. So for us, in the way that we increase from one jurisdiction to another one, we're actually like going on the side of like competing with the traditional way of company governance. Of course, we're limited to a country by country. So let's take, for example, the example of Republic of Seychelles. It's not the $1 trillion market, that's a global market. But of course, we're allowed to attack only the Seychelles market in that sense. So more we expand, more we're going to get closer and closer to that $1 trillion market opportunity.
Within this market or the sector that you're operating in, who are some of the incumbent players and other companies that are doing potentially similar things to you guys?
There are many players actually, both in different aspects. So I would say like that the first one for the blockchain people, the most famous one will probably be Aragon, which it's not 100% a competitor, because for as much as the technology is very similar, we both run on Ethereum, we're both targeting company governance. The big difference is that we are in two different markets. We're trying to be legal, and we're not trying, we are legal in the countries where we operated, while Aragon has no interest of touching the legal side of that. They want to be like a fully perfect example of a decentralized autonomous organization ecosystem. So tech-wise, competitor, market-wise, business-wise, and the way that the product even it is, we're not really competitors. Other players in the space for like the company and corporation sector could be, for example, Awesome in Singapore, Blue Mag in Singapore and Hong Kong, Autonomous in Switzerland, Zave in Singapore and Hong Kong as well. So all the companies that are like trying to improve company governance, not necessarily by using blockchain technology, but using like different approach or systems. How are we different than that? Simply because like the fact that we incorporated everything into smart contracts allowed us to having everything automated. Well, these companies are using like layers on top of the traditional system to improve the system for the end user, but the back end is still like slow. What we are doing is actually not only improving the front end, but not destroy, but replacing the back end as well by using like smart contracts models and et cetera, et cetera. The last player that I would mention is probably Thunderbeam, which it's kind of representing a very cool platform for companies to create SPV, so special vehicles, where they can basically like go for a fundraising, and so a crowdfunding, an equity crowdfunding on their platform. They use blockchain solution, and the very cool aspects on what they're doing is very similar to the beta market of seeders, where you have like a sort of secondary market where you have the opportunity of exchanging shares between one company to another. Now, this thing is extremely nice. Problem is that, what I personally think is not exactly like the best solution ever or improvement ever is the fact that they, in the SPV that they create, they are the ones in control of that SPV. So by default, legally, you're transferring 10% of your company, and you need to trust their system that nothing bad is going to happen. But if something bad happens, you are going to lose 10% of your company, which personally, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I will stay away from a system like that. Even if it's the best solution available in the world, the risk of something bad happening is so high that I will never take that risk for myself.
Turning to questions surrounding like the traction for your company at this stage. So I can ask some kind of quick fire questions, I suppose. So we can open with, are you a pre or post product? Is your product live right now? Can people jump on and use it?
Yes, 100%. It's fully live. We actually have launched our version 2.0 a couple of days ago. So not only it's live, but it's now actually pretty solid on that sense.
And turning to revenue, do you guys have revenue coming in right now, or are you on like a freemium model at the moment, or what's that looking like?
No, so we do have revenue coming in. We're generating revenue already. The model works like every company that we help incorporated. I specific on that we help because we're not an incorporation agent. We're a service provider. So we collaborate with the incorporation agent of the country where we're legally allowed to operate. What happens is that, of course, you create your company. On that company price, you get like your government fees, the incorporation agent fees, and a small fee that goes to us. And of course, every year you have a renewal on that. So it's an every year payment, which is the same thing of like you need to keep your company alive. It works in the same way as in the traditional market. So we're kind of competing on the price level with the traditional incorporation agent, the traditional market, with the difference that we actually add on top of that the dashboard, which means that every time that you're using, let's say, for example, you're transferring shares. If you're transferring shares in Seychelles, on average, you need to pay between $200 and $300 per transfer. With our platform, you still have to pay like a small fee itself per the number of shares, but you're basically taking down the $300 to a couple of cents. So I think we're pretty competitive compared to like the traditional market itself. And the users itself are like, kind of like normal of having like the invoice coming every single year, not having like to pay every month or like completely paperless, hassle-free, very, very fast and easy going on that.
Can I ask about funding that the company has received to date? Have there been like earlier funding rounds and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we have received a pre-seed of a little bit higher than 300,000 USD. And the fund was basically used to like trying to replicate the model to other jurisdictions, of course, which it was one of the main points that we have accomplished. Rebuild completely the architecture of the platform in order to make that more secure, less gas consumption side, and of course more scalable in terms of like usability and improving UX and UI, of course, which all things that were done. Increasing our side of partners. So for example, the KYC was still one thing that, or one model, one process that was extremely boring to solve, because a person in order to like send or approve the KYC would have to transfer and send to us or to the incorporation agent directly a proof of address and a proof of identity notarized in both cases, which means for the user having to go to a lawyer or an attorney or a notary, paying some money, normally on average is like $50 per document, so $100, and then transferring that. One of our key points of like the round was basically to try to avoid or solve that issue. And we have done that with a couple of partners, like for example, Civic Technology or BlockPass, where a user now can still run the KYC in the traditional way. Maybe you already have like your documents already notarized. So, you don't have to spend extra money on that. If you don't, you can actually use like systems like Civic or BlockPass, where you're scanning a QR code and we are receiving those data automatically. And at that point, it costs you nothing of doing that. So again, we decrease another layer, another entry point of incorporating a company from $100 to zero. So all of these things, we actually accomplished basically everything that we were supposed to do with the round. And that's kind of like why we're like start opening for next round now to expand and going back to the topic of like getting that CMO, pushing more on the marketing side at that point.
Okay, and how much are you wanting to raise in this round?
We're looking of taking up 2 million USD.
Okay, and any existing commitments that have kind of, I suppose, happened in earlier rounds or prior to now?
We are in talk with like both existing investors and new investors. I'm actually like putting down more. So far, we're still in that phase where we're like trying to combine as many people as possible and understand actually what will be the appetite on that. We do have like some interest. We're not yet there. So we didn't like sign or complete the round yet. So if more people are interested, that would definitely be like pretty helpful in our case.
Cool. Just a couple more sort of wrapping up questions. Just to ask, when was Korporatio, when was it incorporated? What's the timeline look on that from then to now?
When it was incorporated, it was February 2018. And it was incorporated exactly as a smart company model. So exactly with the model that we propose and we have created, Korporatio was the second company. So we have done like first the pilot with the Republic of Seychelles. They got approved in January. And then a month after, we incorporated us as first official company on that. When we start operating on the project and everything, it was around May of 2017. And in that period of time, in those like 7-8 months, pretty much, we got in contact with the government. We developed the MVP of basically like being sure that every single requirements that is like in the security law was respect by the by default the DAO that we were building up and the type of tokens that we were issuing. So one of the questions that we got many times is like, but can I do an ICO with this model? The answer is no, you cannot. We're talking about security tokens and 100% securities in the specifics. Everywhere in the world, in every single country in the world, there is a law for securities, for shares of a company. Therefore, our tokens are 100% security on that. This means that like you must change a lot the structure and the technology. You cannot send those tokens to whoever you want, to wherever address you want. You need to know the identity of that person. Otherwise, you need to ensure that the country is allowed to receive bearer shares. So if you have a bearer shares that is allowed in the country, then you don't have that problem anymore. But majority of countries nowadays consider that as being illegal. So you got into that like 8-9 month of time where you need to go like a back and forth with the financial service authority of a country. And for as much as they're amazing, because they've done like a great job, governments are slow in general. You know, it's like 2 companies or like 2 teams of 10 people each. Couple of weeks, you sorted out everything basically. A government takes a tons of back and forth because they need to be 100% sure that you're not violating anything. If you're in breach of a law, they're never going to allow you to operate. So they need to go back and forth many, many times. So it took like 8-9 months. We incorporated in February of 2018. We ran like a 3-4 month of experiments. So checking out what actually was possible to be done with the smart companies. And then in June, July of last year, we've done our seed round. And after that, we basically like build up the team, scale up, and basically we're here now planning for the next one.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for speaking with me today.
Thanks to you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining the Wind platform, and all the best for your startup.
Finger crossed, hopefully, but thank you very much.
My pleasure.